Hello, welcome to the most recent episode of Scale App Podcast. This is Dan Eisenberg, and as usual, I'm really excited to be hosting a really interesting entrepreneur in this episode. Of course, I think in all the episodes, I had 4 kids, and I love them all equally, but depends on the day. I like some better. This is a great venture that has some exciting opportunities and also some exciting challenges. It's called Home Surplus. We'll get into that in a second. I just have to make a little bit of a disclosure that I am an investor, a happy investor in Home Surplus, but that won't change the questions I'm going to ask. Okay, so here we go. So here I have with me Joe Schwartz, the founder and CEO. Joe, welcome to Scale App Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Joe is also, I'm not sure for better or for worse for him, he was also my student in the Executive MBA program at Columbia Business School, which I used to teach until 2 years ago. I think I did it for about 12 years, and I had about 70 students in each class. And these were executive MBAs, so not kids. These are people, either professionals or business owners or entrepreneurs who are in their mid-30s typically. And so I got to know Joe through that. So
One of my favorite classes.
thank you for saying that. Why didn't you say that then, Joe? I still teaching. So let's just start off. Say who's Joe Schwartz?
Who's Joe Schwartz? Joe Schwartz is a husband of 16 years, and like you said, a father of 4, 15, 13. I got to think about this, 10 and 6. Live in Long Island, and travel to Home Surplus, New Jersey every day. So we have a nice 1.5 hour commute each way. Visiting stores a lot, so really on the road. And just someone who tries to improve themselves, day by day. So that's whether it's through reading or through other things, just every day, how do I make myself just a little bit better? So
Joe, before getting into Home Surplus, you have a really interesting history as a business owner. So just give us a couple of sort of like thumbnails of what kinds of businesses you've owned in the past.
sure. So the quick history is that I was planning on going to law school back in 2007, 2008 during the financial crisis, and all my friends were not getting jobs. So even though I took my LSAT, I decided, I'm going to start a business. So the first business was a physical therapy business. And without getting into, the whole history, it started realizing that, maybe that's a better route, enjoyed it. But started to realize the challenges of scaling and the challenges of, running businesses in specific industries. So while, we still own those businesses, we realized that we can put together other healthcare businesses and put them and scale them and put them together and get efficiencies and economies of scale. At that point, I decided to go to business school, for 1.5 years, 2 years. At which point we learned lots of new tricks and started looking for businesses that have more barriers to entry and more scalability.
So let me interrupt for a second. If I remember correctly, you have or had a lice removal business. That's really
we're still an investor in that lice remover business. It's called Lice Enders.
what the heck,
It was a healthcare business. They had, believe it or not, they had tremendous barriers to entry. We learned the hard way because it was very hard to expand. So while they had all the contracts with all the schools in New York City, going to Connecticut where somebody else had the contracts, or going to New Jersey where somebody else had the contracts, was extremely difficult to scale. So while it is, and I'm still on the board and still own a share of it. It's a smaller business than the ones that we look at today. But I did that in my 20s, and it was definitely a great experience.
So you have kind of a more or less passive holdings now in a few businesses, but you're full-time with Home Surplus, full-time plus with Home Surplus.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yeah, many more hours than able to for any of the other businesses that we can do. So
a life of a business owner, my God. So tell us about Home Surplus.
So we initially acquired it in the original Home Surplus in late 2017. pretty much right out of business school, we started up working on the acquisition. And
Right. What did you see?
well, the truth is, everything that we saw in the business, we couldn't really figure out what it was, but we knew that there was, they were at that point doing direct to consumer. They would be called a home center today, although I probably did not know it then. And they were doing direct to consumer, anything that they can find. So these home centers all used to be doing, back in the 70s and 80s, used to be doing lumber. They used to be doing lumber. They used to be doing a whole bunch of other things. And with Home Depot and Lowe's, they all sort of evolved. And you see these home centers that evolved into different things, and the ones that didn't evolve died out. And Home Surplus evolved into finding whatever they can find out of mostly China at that point, and finding these niche products that the big box stores did not do a great job: kitchen cabinets, doors, vanities, flooring, and they didn't do a great job at it. And they would bring in limited quantities of those products at direct to consumer prices. And we knew that we had a Home Depot down the block, and these guys were doing, $7-8 million. There was something to it. And that's really, we couldn't figure out what it was that gave them that advantage. But as we started talking to more pros and contractors and realizing that, the big box are great at, the everything, they're not really great at the niche stuff. And that's the reason why you have home centers that are still around. And if you go to any Home Depot or Lowe's, you'll usually find a kitchen place next door, or a flooring place, or a lighting place, because they don't do the best job at these niche products. So that was the initial acquisition in 2017. And since then, the way the story really evolved was, as we started looking at more acquisitions, and we started to realize that why would we bring in one product? Let's just use kitchen cabinets as an example. That's a white shaker cabinet that needs a matching another matching white shaker cabinet, but every single home center is bringing their own white shaker that don't match each other. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have 2 home centers and 3 home centers? And we started seeing that there were other places around. So the first idea was to try to find other companies that were doing similar products that we can get economies of scale, both on the product side and on the leadership side.
But hang on one quick second. I think you may be skipping over what I think, at least in my mind, is really important, and that is, what is this product niche or segment that you're focused on in Home Surplus? And
so
why?
If I can, and I would say that I don't think at this point in the story we really had that niche product. Really, it was, we were seeing that different stores were doing a lot of these different superstores owned by different people around the country. We're doing a lot of different niche products, right? They were bringing in vents. They were bringing in a flooring. They were bringing in anything that they can really sell direct to consumer, and that they felt they had a competitive advantage in. These companies were bringing in that product. And you would go to these industry shows and you'd find, fencing, and you'd find, like, when we did our initial acquisition, we bought our inventory. We didn't know that we bought like $30,000 in fencing sitting in the racking somewhere. Found out the hard way that we had racking, that we had fenced. So they were bringing in whatever they can. But as we started, I would say the first iteration is we started seeing that there were these other stores in adjacent markets that were doing the same thing: big warehouses, big box, big home centers, but that were having these niche products. As a lot of issues in the industry happened, and issues for us individually, because we didn't understand the business, back in 2017 and 18, and then you had tariffs and anti-dumping and COVID, skipping over a lot. I personally started going around the country and saying, hey, I'm going to visit all these stores. And then you started to realize that there were the difference between, a guy in Tennessee and somebody in California and somebody in Florida, and they were doing all sorts of different. Why is one doing 20 million, 30 million, the other one's doing 5 million? Why is this one doing 15 million and this one's doing 6 million? And that's where we started really buckling in on what could be the niche products, what can we focus on, what gives us a tremendous competitive advantage. So Home Surplus today, we call ourselves the Cabinet and Door Superstore. We focus on kitchen and bath cabinets, interior, exterior doors, and the ancillary products that go along with that, such as windows, molding, trim, shower doors, etc. But the primary products that we sell are kitchen and bath cabinets, interior and exterior doors.
And that's when you also raised the slug of money, if I remember correctly, the rough timing, because what I thought was really attractive about the pitch and very intriguing was, look, you have these huge chains like on floors, just flooring products, and you have Floor and Decor, I think.
Yep.
And you said, well, we want to take an aisle, conceptually, an aisle out of Home Depot, kind of flip it on its head, so to speak, and build a big business out of that. So what is it about cabinets and all the related products that sort of makes that exciting?
So, so what you said is exactly correct. So, going back a little bit to the pitch, right? Walmart was founded in the 1960s as an everything store. Home Depot comes along in the late 70s and says, "Hey, your one aisle for home improvement doesn't really cut it anymore. Um, let's make an entire superstore or an entire Walmart out of the home improvement industry." What's going on in the industry today, and in all industries, is you're getting that what Home Depot did to Walmart is being done to Walmart. So you cited Floor and Decor.
The Home Depot.
What Home Depot did to Walmart, sorry, yeah. What Home Depot did to Walmart, other stores are doing to Home Depot. And that's where you have like Harbor Freight Tools, or you have a Floor and Decor, or yeah, a Dick's Sporting Goods would be the Home Depot equivalent of an aisle out of Walmart. But now you have the PGA store and the tennis store, which, by the way, PGA store, I believe, is founded by one of the Home Depot guys, so, or at least owns it today. So, and in his book, in his newest book, he talks about like how he would go into niche retail industries today. So, together with going to all these what I said last time, together with going to all these superstores around the country and really just knocking on the door and talking to business owners, and believe it or not, when you meet somebody who's been doing this for 40 years, they just talk to you. And I've done it. I've not, hey, this is an unbelievable business. Can I speak to the owner? And I would Google who the owner is. Can I speak to John? And they would speak to you, and you have a relatively youngish guy, and maybe at 6-7 years ago, yeah, coming and just wanting to understand about your business, and they told you everything that you needed to know. And so that was one aspect of it. The second aspect of it, like you said, is studying companies like Floor and Decor or other companies that took a niche home improvement. Harbor Freight Tools took a niche product from Home Depot or Lowe's and really was able to excel at it. And kitchen cabinets is probably let's call kitchen cabinets probably the most complicated one of them, and we're learning that the hard way. Flooring in a way is a lot simpler, right? You have, I want certain amount of flooring, 1,000 square feet. Yes, there's some transition pieces and there's some other things, and you have to have some knowledge about the product. But ultimately, you have to have a lot of different SKUs in terms of different products. But you just have to have a lot of one of that product. Where in kitchen cabinets, you want to have one line of kitchen cabinets, you may need 250 different SKUs to make up your kitchen, and to be able to have that in many, many, many different lines in every single store and be somewhat space efficient in an expensive retail market. You have to really have great systems and great technology to be able to predict what SKUs you need. And I would say that Home Depot tried this with HD Expo, I think it was called. And there's plenty of other business models out there in the kitchen cabinet space that are doing extremely well, that are trying to corner a niche of the market, and we're trying to do it in our own way.
So in a way, you've sort of like used the 80-20 rule roughly in kitchen cabinets and said most of the kitchen cabinets are it's not distributed sort of randomly. There's a few SKUs that get much more of the attention than others. There are much more styles, let's say. They get a lot more attention. Is that accurate?
So from a style perspective, yes. From a style perspective, you can say that there's a good 80-20 rule. That, if you have, these 35 lines available and in stock, you could probably cover 80%, and then you have to rely on special order vendors for the next 20%. With regards to within the line itself and the SKUs that make up that line, that 80-20 rule could be challenging, because somebody walks in and you just happen to have a different size kitchen. Somebody needs a base 24, the other person needs a base 27, the other person needs all sorts of sizes. You need to be able to have everything, to have what we call job block quantities in for every single customer.
And the value proposition for the customers compared to, let's say, Home Depot itself, is that in a lot of cases it's cash and carry. Is that correct? And also for the professionals, you serve both the end user and the professional contractor who can come in and get in enough cases, they can get exactly what they want right away rather than the typical waiting for, I don't know how long, 8, 12 weeks at least, right, for their cabinets.
Correct. So I would say that's one customer who is wants something immediately or right away. I mean, you could think about all the challenges that happen in the kitchen cabinet industry, even if you don't need it right away, but you need it in 8 weeks, but you get the wrong cabinet and you need another 8 weeks. Now the pro can't finish the job, or the homeowner's stuck without a kitchen, or there wasn't it was something comes in damaged, which happens all the time, right? So now you need to wait another 8 weeks to get that item replaced, or there's damages, there's wrong picks, right? Everything went right, or the designer designed it incorrectly. So it's not just about it's the reliability of knowing that the customer can walk in and know that they have what they need when they need it. I would say it like that. With buying consumer direct and having that many lines, pricing becomes a big part of it, and cutting out a middleman. And believe it or not, I would say a lot of it is really about, it sounds very cliche, but the customer experience in the kitchen cabinet industry. Big box, and the bigger you are, the more challenging it is to provide that customer experience. It's the reason why the kitchen cabinet industry is dependent on, every showroom in the book. You can drive down, any main street and find, 5 kitchen cabinet places. What's the reason for that? They have no buying advantage. They have no purchasing advantage. But there might be an owner there who knows the kitchen industry backwards and forwards for 30 years, and can provide an unbelievable customer experience. And replicating that as we are doing, as we're scaling, and being able to duplicate that owner who's 30, 40 years, with designers who don't have 30, 40 years of experience, and a warehouse team that doesn't have 30, 40 years of experience, is probably the most challenging part of our business, more than just stocking the place.
So before we go on and talk about some of the challenges and also things you've really learned and nailed, um, what, just very briefly, can you tell us the story of Home Surplus just by a few numbers? Just numbers.
Um, okay, so it's
How many stores? How many stores? Where you're located? How many square feet? And revenue?
5 superstores. We have one main distribution center and 3 partner distribution centers currently. I should know this off the top of my head, we're roughly probably 500,000 square feet between our 5 stores and distribution centers. And we are, I would just put it at, we're over 30 million in revenue at this point. I know that gives us a big range, but that's where we are. Some superstores bigger than others. And each one, some are growing in this environment by 20-30%. Some are being more challenged, and that's what we're learning about retail, is that you got to be able to do all of these and open up new stores all at once. And
So before we get into the challenges, what absolutely excites you about this in terms of where this could go?
I would say, first of all, understanding the niche of the business. So really understanding the opportunity that there is. That was the first idea, realizing that and I'm not saying nobody, I think there's plenty of kitchen cabinet large chains out there, but being able to tackle it from our own way, number one. And what I was trying to answer before was, becoming really, really, good at something. I would say having a niche plus getting good at something creates passion.
Can this be huge?
So I'll cite Floor and Decor. Floor and Decor today, I don't know, the market's been volatile, but they're roughly 300-400 stores. When I started following them, there were 100 superstores. They have a $10 billion plus equity value today. So the answer is that if the unit economics work on a superstore, which they absolutely do, then all you have to do is wash, rinse, and repeat. So and we are in the stage of we're in the washing and rinsing stage, and we just need to get to the repeat stage at this point.
So what makes you think that you can do it, and what do you have to get right in order to get to the repeat stage, and what do you have to avoid doing wrong? to get to that repeat stage? Because that's really at the heart of scalability. I mean, I guess repeat is just another word for scale in your in the way you're using.
Yes.
Right.
So this podcast is about scaling. So if I have to list a few things that you have to get right, it's the systems. You really can't do this without the systems. Obviously, the leadership team, and you talk about getting wrong. Every single one of these things that I'm about to tell you, we've gotten some wrong until we gotten it right. So being wrong is, yeah.
But you think you have them right now. You think your systems.
But the scar tissue from the from late 2017 till today, is yes. We think we have them. Absolutely, we have them right today.
I don't know. I don't know an entrepreneur that doesn't have scars. If you can look closer, maybe some of them cover them up really well. But I think
I write them down and make sure that I remember them. How's that? So especially on hires. When you think that you found the next greatest thing and it doesn't work out, your mind wants to forget about them very quickly, and I make sure you write it down, and I have a notebook, a digital notebook of what went wrong, what I could have done better in terms of scoping that out, and hopefully learning from it. So scaling systems, the leadership team on what's called the corporate side, store managers, critical. Larry Stone, who was the COO of Lowe's, would tell me all the time, who I've befriended, and he's been a tremendous help to me. He was at Lowe's for 40 years, and he told me that the only common thing between one Lowe's and another Lowe's is the name on the door, right? And, it's every store manager, and we see that, right? You can have one store that's growing by 30%, and you can have one store that's declining by 10%, and it's the store manager. So system, leaders, store manager, obviously store processes, right? Retail is a complicated business. Freight is coming in, freight is going out. Customers want it today, they want it tomorrow. There's design going on. There's customer preferences. There's the actual showroom, the vignette, the merchandising. I mean, marketing, sales. There's just so much going on. So really having those store processes nailed down to a core, where you can go into a store, really audit what's going on.
But you have that show. Let me just push back a little bit on that. You have a lot of that. You never have all of it. Let's say you already have damn good systems, right? You're running 5 stores and they're doing well. You have an executive team. We'll get into that in a minute. The last I looked was an amazing team. You understand this business in and out. So let's say you've got all these systems and you've got everything worked out. What is keeping you from being 10, 15, 20? Is it capital, people, opportunities, tariffs,
Yeah, so I would still say, although we have a lot of the store processes worked out, I still think that as we've grown, to your point of the leadership team, and I hate the word middle management, but in stores sometimes that's needed. So you have a store manager, then we have our leadership team, but we need people that are going into stores that are pushing our agenda, so to speak, and also the other way around, getting their agenda back to us. I would say that those processes have now, in the last 6 months to a year, have gotten tremendously better. So you would have stores that would order in different ways, right? So you would, one store would order, use the system to order it this way, and one system would use to order it that way. The way they would receive the freight, and one would receive it indifferently. So getting those, let's call it centralized operations, where all the stores are not. Remember, we also acquired 5 stores, so a lot of them, have their legacy ways of doing things, and they were working. So putting them onto the same system, they were also using different systems. So we're using NetSuite ERP, making sure that up until 6 months ago, we had different locations on different systems. So we're now at the point of where those processes are all coming together and being documented and centralizing and making sure that everybody is working on in the same way so that we can repeat it. And I would say, to your point of resource allocation and efficiency, is always going to be something that you need to scale. Thankfully for us, that has not been an issue. We opened up one store, like I said, and it's a trade to a much bigger store. That was our first test, and then we just need to be able to take all the learnings from opening that one new store and being able to open 1 to 2. 20% growth a year is what we're looking for in terms of store growth.
Great. So let's talk just for a couple of minutes about the executive team. You've succeeded in bringing in, last I looked, people from, I mean, no team's perfect, but looks like kind of a dream team. These are really experienced executives from your competitors, from the Home Depots of the world. First of all, how do you get them? And then some of these are probably older than you. How do you lead them? Because these are high octane executives.
So how do you get them? Let's start with how do you get them? I would, you know, one of one of the somebody actually a professor in business school once told me one of the best untapped resources there are people who are semi-retired. So being able to get so let's just say I cited Larry Stone before, who I actually got to through one of let's call it my failed hires. So we put out an ad, we got a regional vice president from Lowe's, and he was not without saying names, he wasn't very good. But one of the things that he kept on talking about was this guy Larry Stone, who was like this retail god, for lack of a better term. He's on the board of Dick's Sporting Goods. Currently he was at Lowe's for 40 years. He started as a stock boy, made his way up to being the president and COO, and he's a retail legend. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me just try to reach out to him. If everybody's going to talk about him all the time, let me try to reach out to him. And I think I did it on LinkedIn. Wrote him a message that he knew I was for real and wasn't some bot. And he responded, and we set up a call and we hit it off and flew down to North Carolina where he was. And he's been, a father figure to our business ever since. And then when I needed some help in marketing, he referred me to his chief merchant and chief merchandising officer, who was again semi-retired. He young to be retired. He was in his late 50s. He did very well at Lowe's, and he's like, you know what? I got 20 hours a week. I'll throw in. But not just did he invest in the business, he also, was 20 hours a week, which is more than we ever needed. And he helped us avoid many mistakes. And, we made all new ones with him, which is part of the process, right? So, but he was tremendously helpful in teaching us how to scale our business, the things that worked at Lowe's, the things that didn't work at Lowe's.
The semi-retired or the 50s and above, let's say, is extraordinarily valuable, but they still have to have some motivation. I assume it's not just the money if they're semi-retired. It may be money always is important and has to be aligned, but there's this, relative to them, a young whippersnapper.
No, 100%. They have to, they have to obviously believe in what you're doing. One of the questions I used to ask Larry Stone and this chief merchant name is Bob Gefeller, and chief merchant at Lowe's is probably the number 4 or 5 position, and he was with us. So first of all, it gave us a lot of credibility. But I used to ask them and I think I asked it to you, Dan, when you were doing your kitchen, I think at the time you're doing it at Home Depot, I said, what was your experience? It's like somebody tells me they've done it. I go, what was your experience? So I asked Larry Stone and Bob, what percentage of the time do mistakes come back? And their response was something like 33 to 50%. And I was like, they knew the problem, right? So immediately they knew the problem of what we were trying to solve. A 33 to 50% mistake rate is just, insanity. So I would say they had to believe in what you were doing.
What you're doing, what Home
and what you're doing. Yeah, we have to believe what Home Surplus was doing. I would say you also catch them at a right time where, they don't want to be fully retired. They do want to be able to, leverage everything that they've learned in their entire career and be able to bring it and be helpful and be that type of. So I think it's also, I don't call it altruistic, completely, but it's that they want to be able to do something with all the skills that they built up as opposed to it going to waste. And of course, the money, the equity, in this case, they invested. Sorry, Bob. In this case, Bob Gefeller invested with us in addition to whatever equity plans we'd had. So yes, it wasn't just about the actual money that we were paying.
And you've been able to build out other.
Yes. So just one example from Lowe's, correct? But I wouldn't say that everybody came from big box. I would say one of the. You also want to have, there's a lot of problems in big box, which is the reason, there's a lot of, middle management and a lot of, what's the right word?
you can swim.
People who manage people who manage people, and it's very hard to find somebody who's both at the level that you need and willing to do the work, because we're not a company of people that are managing people who are managing people, and it's just we're trying to avoid that at all costs. So it's very, very hard to find those types of people. So and like with Bob, we did find that. But then again, I would say I would just ask around in the industry. I would ask vendors, who is the best guy that and best guy or gal that in the industry? Who is the best person? And if the same name pops up 3 or 4 times, I would just get the phone number and call that person. And our head of commercial came from that type of recruiting. Lumber Liquidators, famously, LL Flooring just had a bankruptcy, and we knew that a lot of the people were going to be available. And LL Flooring, the former CEO was one of the one of the executive vice presidents at Lowe's. So a lot of the LL Flooring people were ex-Lowe's people. We were able to easily, pick who was good and who wasn't good from that mid-level of people, or high level of people who were doing the work, but also high enough level to be at our leadership team. And we were very successful at hiring 2 or 3 people at LL Flooring as well.
So we're gonna have to end in just a few minutes. I promised my listeners that they can listen from beginning to end on their way to the supermarket and be finished before they get home with the groceries. So, but I do want to ask about going forward. It sounds like, from what you're saying, that you're almost feeling comfortable that you've, in a way, quote unquote, perfected all that you need to perfect, and are ready to start the repeating part of the wash and rinse cycle. And I guess my question is, let's assume that you get there, and I think you're largely there. What are the main kinds of resources? Is it mostly capital that you're going to need at that point, or is there something else you're going to need in order to be a national chain with dozens, if not hundreds, of stores someday?
Of course, the faster you scale, the more capital you're going to need. You could only fund so many stores out of your cash flow, or we're pretty much a debt-free company at this point, which is pretty surprising to most people. So we can definitely leverage our balance sheet to be able to open up new locations. But again, if you're opening up 1 or you're opening up 10, that's a capital question, and also a human capital question of, do you have the ability to have store managers and have a leadership team. So I would say more than capital at this point, it's the confidence that we just opened up a new. I'll give us an example. We just opened up that new store in Baltimore, and we had a whole bunch of things in the moving process go wrong. And then I went down last week. I was in Maryland for the whole week for a few days last week. And, you see that certain things that were supposed to be done in the move, customers didn't know that we moved. Customers didn't know that we, even though we sent emails and we had the calls, and, so there's just, these little things that keep you up as you open up a new store with $0 in revenue, to ensure that your sales teams have all those we're using, the CRM and Salesforce as well, to make sure that, all those processes and all those tasks are all perfectly aligned, so that we can go out into a new market and be able to get all the pros that we're getting from either hitting us up through our marketing campaigns, or through our outside salespeople who are on the street, ensuring that all flows through very, very quickly, so that you have a revenue generating, profitable location very, very quickly. And I would say, as someone who hasn't ever started a location from $0, if you ask me what keeps me up at night, that would keep me up at night is, yes, we were very good at buying a location that does X million, and 2X million and 3X million. We've never done a $0. And that's where, that will be our next challenge, more than capital allocation, more than, getting the resources. And of course, our people are the most important thing. So store managers, and being able to hire the right store manager. We've had plenty of bad store managers that have hurt businesses, and ensuring that you have the correct bench, which means you have to hire more people than you need. In stores, you have to have 2 store managers essentially per store, because you need to have one sitting on the bench ready to open up your next store. I would say those are the biggest challenges.
So, Joe, I think we could have this conversation for a lot longer, but let me end with just this one kind of strange question because you're not in your 50s or 60s like some of the people that you're hiring. But if you had to meet with your, let's say, 10-year younger self, Joe Schwartz, um, what would you tell him?
So I've heard you ask this to others on the podcast, and I've heard their answers, and their answers were all very good. There's a lot of things that I would tell myself.
Just
I'll
a
try to
couple, a couple
I'll
of
just try to
topics.
I'll just try to run through it quickly.
Okay.
Make sure you hire people with common sense. I would say that especially when you buy a business, you would think that automatically people can run on common sense, and you don't need to get involved. It's amazing the amount of executives, as you call it, and leaders that can solve a common sense problem. So relying, surrounding yourself with people not just that have all the other leadership capabilities, and we call pi squared. I heard this from another from an executive: passion, purpose, integrity, and intelligence. That intelligence has to include common sense. Um, when to really judge, when to really take somebody's past experiences, and when to not take past experiences. We were littered with, that doesn't work because we tried that here and we tried that there. And in the beginning, I would say, oh, they tried it, at this big box, so they tried it there. It doesn't work, and you have to learn why it doesn't work, and how to be able to take their feedback, but then also question it in a way that will get them on board to try that thing that they think they've already tried, and vice versa is true as well, right? Something that worked, and asking the right questions on why maybe it won't work here. Um, Understanding every detail. I would say, people will try to push you out of the details. Um, Trust us. We got, and I think you have to, we raise capital, like I said earlier in the podcast. We raised capital because we understood the details of the business, and people recognize that we understood every little detail of the business. So especially as you're scaling to, there is no detail that's too small for you. And if you want to be involved in a decision, or you want to be involved in a meeting as a leader, get involved, understand those details. I've been, I don't say pushed out, but we got this, and then they don't got it. So be involved, and you want to be involved.
Give us just one more if you have it.
I would say, no matter how you hear, and this is cliche, but as much as you imagine it, it's longer. People talk about how hard it is to be an entrepreneur, how many existential crises you deal with. Um, you know, um, and you hear it, and it's like you have to learn how to deal with that, right? You have to learn how when you're getting a crisis that maybe 5 years ago I would have not slept at night for. How you just have to be able to. It's not most of the time, 99.99% of the time, it's not going to kill you, not catastrophic, not going to kill the business, and you have to, run through hell with a smile, right? You have to be able to, you can't be down about it. You have to. I would say in the beginning, you would get down about it. You would have sleepless nights, and eventually you would solve it anyway. So, you might as well be able to lead people with a smile, encourage them that this is not going to be the end, like, they always think it is. And so at some point in the story,
In a way, Joe, you get kind of used to what the beginner would be very stressed about. You get used to that because the feeling of stress doesn't help you deal with it, but thinking about it and dealing with it helps you deal with it. But to just come back to your previous point, I really like it because people in my profession gave a very bad reputation to micromanagement. And what you said about managing the details, a lot of people would call micromanagement. What I think they really meant by micromanagement is telling people what to do or how to do all these little things when what they needed to know is what to do, not how to do it. They could figure
correct.
some of that out themselves. But I really like what you say because, in my observation, the really successful company builders, they would know all the details. What they do with those details is a different question, but you have to know the bits and bytes, so to speak.
So it actually goes to an earlier point that you made, which is you asked me about how do you get, a chief merchant from Lowe's coming to, respect you, I would say it's the details. Like when you could start talking about a kitchen cabinet or a door, and you could start articulating every single line that's in every single warehouse with every single SKU and the mins and the maxes, and tell them how the racking strategy is and walking them through that. You would think that's the ABCs of the business. Of course, you know that, and they're sitting there, with their mouth open, going, "Why does he know that? Right? Only the junior merchant should know that, right?" Or something like that. Or, and I would say the quickest way to earn respect from, and I know we spoke about some of the leaders. I don't, if they listen to this podcast, I wasn't trying to exclude, our CFO, who's essentially running the business today, and the others who we found, our chief, our head of marketing, who we got from one of our investors. But I would say the fastest way to earn their respect is when you walk a superstore with them, and you walk a showroom with them, and you show them every single detail of how this vignette was structured, and how this signage works, and how the pricing works, and how that corresponds to the warehouse and the racking plan and the WMS, and how that integrates with our systems, is the fastest way you can earn anyone's respect in the business.
I really like that. And with that, we're going to have to end. Our listeners are already back from the grocery store. They put the groceries away, and I think they're already cooking lunch. So
Okay. I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, wow, that was like 50 minutes.
Well, it's great.
45 minutes.
And I want to thank you, Joe Schwartz from Home Surplus. We're going to be watching and waiting to see how this develops into a national chain that may even someday be even global. And thinking about that, but if you can nail it nationally, then there are other horizons. Again, this is Dan Eisenberg from Scale Up Podcasts. You can go to Buzzsprout. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts that we post on LinkedIn. It's free, so enjoy it. You can always send me comments about things you'd like to hear. But we're having a blast here. And, I have an idea that I'll just share with you now. When I get to episode 20, I'm going to figure out my damnedest how to transcribe all these damn things and then put them into a artificial intelligence platform to derive insights, because these are really phenomenal. Joe, thank you again very much.
Thank you.